to tell you the story. Chase, are you going to tell the story of this book, creation of the book?
I was planning on doing that a little bit, but I actually want to hear your version of it, because I remember the first time you told me it was much more captivating than I think what I can do.
No, I was just stunned by it because I'm in publishing, right? So it's so hard to actually write a book that as soon as you get the book written, you want to publish it as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I was stunned by the history of this book. This book was written, I think, 1938. And Napoleon Hill had just, soon after that, he has published Think and Grow Rich. It was immensely popular, and he refused to publish this book, Outwitting the Devil. He did not publish it his entire life. His heirs inherited the book. They also refused to publish it. It's only in 2010 it got published. So I was just captivated by that, because what happened was that a friend of mine, Case, was actually presenting on this book at the meetup. So I decided that I always check up on the book. So I started checking up, and this is the story I heard. I said, wait a minute, what is in this book that makes it so? So there are several things. So firstly, at the top level, at the kind of surface level, it's the theme of the book itself. The plot of the book is that the author corners the devil and puts him in a position where he has to speak the truth. So the devil explains how he operates in great amount of detail with just tremendous psychological insight. So that is one thing. The second thing is that it is a very deep take on how human psychology works, the dark parts of it, and what are the natures. It also has a very deep criticism of all the institutions, like the education, like the family, like the church, like how everything is put together. So it's a very deep critique of how things are, and it shows you what things can be. So that is its power. It doesn't mince any words. It is very direct, very powerful. The reason Napoleon Hill did not want to publish it is that he thought that all his kind of adoring fans would be put off by different aspects of it, because it would cast a negative shadow on things that they prized. But the virtue of this book is its brutal honesty. And I prize it above anything else, that brutal honesty. So that's what this book is. So that's the story of the book. So Chase and Alex, take it away.
Yeah, so I'll actually give a little bit of my summary of the book as well. But first, I want to say, for anybody who's new to the Switch, or maybe has gone and listened to a couple of episodes, today we're beginning a new series. Today is the first day in that series on this book, Outwitting the Devil. And my hope is that this series will help us all make a switch of a new kind. Instead of simply focusing on introducing new ideas and concepts as we sort of have in the past, we'll be taking some time, deliberate time, to work on something that affects us all to our core. And that has to do with our very own habits and behaviors. And we'll start using terms like drifting or non-drifting, and that'll make a lot more sense, hopefully, by the end of today. This is going to be an opportunity for all of us to apply many of the ideas that we've studied over time, including many of the ideas on the Switch, in some of the other meetup groups at 52 Living Ideas, in our lives, in philosophy. This is your chance to, put your money where your mouth is. The skills that we practice during the next few weeks have the potential to transform our lives permanently, even if in a small way. So we begin the series on Outwitting the Devil by talking about the book, getting an overview of the ideas we'll be working with. But this will really be the only week in which we'll primarily discuss chapters, sections, passages, and all that in a really systematic way. For the rest of this series, we'll be talking about the ideas. And you're welcome to continue reading or rereading the book as you like. It may help you. But in my mind, if I could give an ask for 15 minutes of your time outside of listening to the podcast every week, I would prefer that you spend that time focusing on the principles, the exercises, maybe some of the extra reading that we'll be putting out as well, because beyond reading the actual words in this book, the ideas really matter. The ideas are what are going to help you improve, and have helped me improve, and are going to continue to help me improve. I'm going to be doing the exercises right along with us. Alex will too. So without further ado, we'll jump into the book. Shrikant gave a great summary. A couple of more background things that I think are interesting to take of note so that you get some idea of the credibility and the weight of this work. So Napoleon Hill was tasked by John Rockefeller to study success. And Rockefeller reminded him, don't forget to study the failures as well. And in fact, study the failures tenfold. And Napoleon Hill went out and he did that. He interviewed thousands upon thousands of people. If I remember the numbers correctly. So he interviewed something like 3 or 4 times as many people who had failed in some sense than were considered successful millionaires, things like that. And this is early 20th century. And he wrote Think and Grow Rich, which, as Shrikant mentioned, he published. And in my mind, that book is about the positive version of how to succeed. Outwitting the Devil elucidates what takes people off of the path and causes them to drift into stagnation, to essentially be failure in some sense, to embody failure in some sense. And the way that he did that was through this encounter, this conversation, this interrogation of the devil. And there's argument as to whether Hill himself believed that he was talking to the real devil or was using this as a metaphor. And to be honest, I don't think that matters. I think that the principles in here are just as important either way. And as Shrikant mentioned, it was too politically incorrect a work to publish at the time. It shows the devil as this sort of knowing trickster bent on drifting people away from success using deep, intelligent, philosophical insight, psychological insight. And in this conversation, the devil is bound to tell the truth by whatever the mechanics of the conversation. The devil is not lying in any sense, doesn't need to lie in this case, which is even more interesting because the fact that these facts could come to light and the devil doesn't even need to lie about them. They are so powerful. They're such powerful forces, the forces that drift us off the path of success, that even if you know those forces are there, you can still succumb to them. 98% of people will still succumb to those forces. So that brings me to the core concept. The core concept of Outwitting the Devil has to do with the drifting self versus what he calls the other self, what I often call the non-drifting self. And the drifting is essentially the path away from success. And in the book, the devil talks about all the ways that he or she, or I say she because when I read it with my wife and she voiced the devil, and it added this cool character to it because she's an actress, and it was amazing. So the devil talks about all of the ways that he takes people away from the path of success in life, away from fulfilling their purpose, away from the things that they really want, and distracts them and fills the gaps of their minds with fear and keeps them from succeeding. So on my version, the Kindle edition, there are some highlights of the character of a drifter. These are just my highlights from this big long list. It goes much more than this, but just to give you an idea of what a drifter is in this sense, a drifter is somebody who spends all he earns and more too if he can get credit. He will be ill-tempered and lacking in control over his emotions. He will make the same mistake over and over again, never profiting by failure. He will be narrow-minded and intolerant on all subjects, ready to crucify those who may disagree with him. He will be loud in his condemnation of his government, but he will never tell you, definitely, how it can be improved. He will eat too much and exercise too little. He will criticize others who are succeeding in their chosen calling. And he will tell a lie rather than admit his ignorance on any subject. And there's a quote where Hill says to the devil, "You bribe your victims through their natural desires and lead them astray while you induce them to become drifters if they respond to your lure. If they refuse to respond, you plant the seed of fear in their minds or trap them through some form of misfortune and hogtie them while they're down." Now, I don't know about you, but the way that hits me when I first read the list of what a drifter is like, my mind goes to, oh yeah, I know those people. People that criticize their government but don't have a way to fit. Like, I can see drifters out there. That's those people. And when I read that second part, I start to sort of turn it inward and go, well, wait a minute. This book isn't about other people. This book is about me. This book is about all of the ways that I, as a human being, succumb to the forces of drifting, succumb to the forces of the devil. And not only is it about that, it's also about, if you put the work into reading it, how to properly avoid becoming a drifter and how to cultivate your other self, your non-drifting self. And there's also a list in here of the characteristics of a non-drifter. You know, non-drifters are people who are purposeful, who think their own thoughts, who are mindful, skeptical, driven, insistent, persistent. It says, the quickness of his decisions clearly mark him as a person who knows exactly what he wants and is determined to get it, no matter how long it may take or what price he must pay. He has a good memory. He never offers an alibi for his shortcomings. He never blames others for his mistakes, no matter if they deserve the blame. If he does not know the answers, he will say so frankly. If you ask him questions, he gives you direct answers and never falls back on evasions or resorts to subterfuge. He extends many favors to others, but accepts favors sparingly or not at all. And it goes on. But essentially, a non-drifter has this key piece that we will keep coming back to that I think is best described as definiteness of purpose. And there's a quote that just came to mind. I wish I had it in my notes, but it is something like, in order to not be a drifter, you have to know what you want out of life, and you have to be willing to pay life's price for it and not accept anything less. So, with all that being said, that is what the next 12 weeks on the Switch will be about. And I want to open the floor to some discussion. So here's the way that I want to do this. If everybody could put in the chat, I'll put my scale right here. Put in the chat your familiarity with this particular work, Outwitting the Devil. Put a 1 in the chat if you've never heard of it. Put a 2 in the chat if you've heard of it, or you like read it a long time ago, you don't remember much, just some familiarity. And put a 3 in the chat if you're very familiar with this book. You can go ahead and put those in now. Cool. All right, great. Lots of 1s, a couple of 2s. Cool. A 3 from Claire. 3 from Jeanette. I know my mom's listening. I think she would be somewhere in the 2 to 3 range, because I just had her read it. Shrikant says 3. Okay, lots of 1s. Great. You guys, this is awesome. I see Jeff is here. Another 3. Cool. So from anybody who answered 3, I would like to go around and ask you to speak off the cuff for 2 minutes, 5 minutes tops, about a couple of things. Here are the prompts so that you can prepare, and you can always skip if you need. It's okay. First of all, what did you get out of the book? What were the most powerful lessons, themes, topics, ideas? And what impact did they have on you specifically? Because I really want to focus this in on applying these ideas, not just how cool and amazing the ideas are, but like how can we actually transform our lives with these things, because it's so juicy and amazing. And then if you can, and this is a difficult prompt potentially, but what questions do you have still? So that's the question. For anybody who answered a 3, we'll go through and ask that. So first of all, Claire, if you are around and willing, you're the first 3 in there, so you're up. If you can. Oh, I have to unmute you?
I have.
There you are.
Yes.
Hi guys. Tell me if my audio is awful, but here's what I got. I think the most powerful piece that has stuck with me is the part of the book when they talk about how many drifters there are. So the devil has some line where he's like 99.9, 100% of people, or just this tiny fraction, are not drifting. And I think that just the magnitude of that was quite moving, because we all know, some people are drifting. We all have strong days and weak days, but that really stuck with me, of how profound that it's not just something that a few people are doing, but really the majority of the population are in this state of drifting. I thought that was quite moving. I think in terms of questions that I have, Shrikant introduced me to this book. I think I loved it. I loved the conversational nature of it. And I think I even tap into that still, of like going back to just having a conversation with my potential to drift, and acknowledging that, and almost sort of just watching it in a meditative state. But I think the question I still have is like, I still feel like I don't totally get it. Like I understand these concepts. I see how they're formative, but I feel like there's some magical piece of it that when Shrikant first introduced me to it, that I'm not unlocking. I know that's quite broad, but I think, I've heard secondhand that this can be transformative, and outside of just don't drift, I'm curious what else I should be gleaning.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Claire. Next is, let's see, Shrikant. Would you like to talk about what you've gotten from this book?
Sure. Well, this is one of my favorite books. The core issue here, the distinction between having a definite purpose and drifting, is a fundamental issue of human life. It is whether you just use your system 1, which is just drifting, pure system 1 without any system 2 is drifting. This is terminology of Daniel Kahneman. Whereas engaging system 2 and keeping that guiding your system 1, that is having a definite purpose. So it's the most powerful, clear capturing of this. I'm seeing the same point in the series I'm doing on Buckminster Fuller. He distinguishes this as between mind and brain. Drifting is brain, it's body, it's physical energy, and it has its own nature that flows in a certain way. What mind does is that, in my mind, it does 3 things. It sets purposes, it identifies general principles on which you're going to act, and it makes plans to do that. Those 3, purpose, principles, and plans. And that is what has made civilization possible. And that makes all kinds of progress possible at a civilization level. And that's what it makes possible at the individual level. Now, the virtue of this book is that it dramatizes this issue, and its portrayal of what drifting is so perceptive psychologically that, and you can see it in yourself and others. And the most important thing is to see it in yourself, because that's where most of your, like 90% of your gains are going to come from. And he just puts it so beautifully, so powerfully. And that's the heart of it. The question that is still open for me is, and that's what I'm working on with what I'm doing with Buckminster Fuller, is that I think that this idea of general principles, of formulating general principles, is actually the point of maximum leverage. So there is a purpose, which is something, but having a general principle where you start acting along certain general principles which are conducive to life, taking the effort to kind of understand them or to grasp them fully, test them, and then just using them on a massive scale allows tremendous kind of efficiency of action. And so that's what I need to learn more about, that how to operate on general principles. So that's the question still open in my mind.
Excellent. Thank you, Shrikant. Next up is Jeff.
So Chase, thanks for doing this, and thanks for asking. So there was a time in my life a few decades ago where I needed to make a decision as to which direction it was going to go, and I read this book during that period of time. It was a long time ago, and the choice was to either go down the road of psychology and to become a psychotherapist, or to go into the world of community development and try to change the world. And I loved them both, and I was being recruited by the deans of my university to do both, and they would do anything for me. I chose community development, but I never left psychology. And so I spent the next number of decades focused on where I thought the combination was, where the leverage was, which was on leadership. And over that time, in just a refusal to tolerate or devote myself or give myself over to anything that was not maximizing the opportunity to achieve results through expanding and growing the most powerful leaders to change the world I could possibly find and partner with. What I achieved, and I began to recognize this, I was able to make a living doing what was most important to me in the world. And I've since grown to appreciate how unique an opportunity that actually has been, especially one that could be sustained. So on the other side of having taken 20,000 people through intensive multi-program leadership experiences and being able to give away $200 million of other people's money in the largest experiment in unrestricted philanthropy in the history of the United States, and being able to generate over $3 billion in financing for community development projects throughout the United States. I find myself right now kind of back in that same place where I don't need to do any of these things. And I'm trying to figure out what should I do with the rest of my life? Which is the same decision that I put in front of all the people that were always in my leadership programs over the last 40 years, which was, nobody knows how long they have left. You have certain assets that you could apply to achieving whatever you think might be the purpose of your life. What do you aspire to achieve with however much time you have left? And then on any given day or any period of time, what might be the things that you could do, the best things you could do to leverage those outcomes. And so I'm thrilled that you're doing this, and really look forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Next up is going to be Jeanette, and then Mike E, and then Alex. So Jeanette, have at it.
Okay, hi. Awesome. Well, there's many things that jumped out at me while reading this book with Chase, and lots of I want to call it like mic drops, where he would just you read it off the page and you just felt it just hit the floor, and you just knew the impact of what his words were saying. But I think what struck me hardest was actually at the end, when I realized, and when they kind of talk about how the fact that, and I might spoil this a little bit, that he didn't actually publish it. The fact is he, you know, he had all these thoughts and ideas, and even though, you know, the devil kind of talks throughout the book about, you know, saying, you know, you won't publish this. You know, there's no way you're going to ruin your life by putting this out there. You'll be ridiculed. You'll be criticized. Your life will be ruined. You know, and the fact that he already knew all of these things that he knew after writing this book, and it didn't come out until 2011. And I think, you know, the family must have found it and published it or whatever. I just think that's absolutely incredible. And just amazing at how prevalent all of what he talked about is still prevalent today. So I guess with that, my question would be, you know, how could we truly develop, like, I guess, the type of resilience that it takes to stay a non-drifter even when things get like that? I just think that's just absolutely amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. And excellent question. I think that's a big piece here, is with any work like this that's inspiring, you can feel inspired in the moment. You can feel inspired after you read it, but how do you sustain that? Because life gets tough again. You know, the excitement of having read Outwitting the Devil wears off. So how do you pass that? And that I should have mentioned that as well. Thank you for bringing that up, Jeanette, that in the book itself, the devil says to him, you won't publish this. It's not going to happen. You will succumb to fear. You will succumb to the pressures of needing your social status and being afraid of the ridicule. You won't do it. It's going to be too dangerous for you. And that's exactly what happens. And his wife didn't want him to publish it. And then it got passed down to their family, and they didn't want to publish it because it was going to be too controversial. Anyway, next up is Mike. Mike E, you have the floor. Mike E, where are you? Okay. Mikey.
Okay, it takes a while to find the mute button on this thing.
No worries.
The unmute button. The book is metaphor. It's Allah, Joseph Campbell, Og Mandino, the Devil and Daniel Webster, and even the Bible. I think it's closest to the biblical story of Job, and it's retold in the first person, past pluperfect. Amazing coincidence and similarities. And the story of Job, if you remember, is God and Satan were sitting at a bar trying to analyze the success story of Job. Was it due to purpose-driven behavior? Was it just due to serendipity? Or was it due to Job's brilliance and acumen? And they never came to a conclusion, actually, but they tried a number of interventions to see how he would behave if they messed with him a little bit. And they did. Now, in that process, just like a psychologist analyzing some rats in a maze or in a cage, they found some things out about Job's personality, and I don't think they ever like much of the stories and metaphors and Aesop's fables. They never actually got to a conclusion, but the audience learned a lot about the personality of what happens when you try to either sell your soul to the devil or try to outwit the devil directly. And it was an interesting story, and I'm not sure what I learned from it, but I did learn a lot from it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Mike. And last but not least, Alex.
So the biggest thing that when I started to kind of reflect on what I've been reading is none of this is surprising to me. Like every single thing the devil says makes total sense. There's nothing that's quite like a light bulb moment. But how it's divided into kind of a good guy and a bad guy, and the way that it makes these divisions very clear, I think really helped to clarify my ideas about all these things, that although like I knew, these certain of these things would cause me to be something like the drifter in the book, even though I didn't use that word. And I think this book is kind of uniquely useful to me because of that division in good and bad, and the fact that it just resonates with what I already think. It almost plays on my sense of confirmation bias. It helps it resonate more deeply because I already believe those, but it really helps show me the and your things that lead to your demise. And there's a lot. It brings up a lot of questions, but some just like theoretical ones, like can a society function in a world full of non-drifters? Our current society wouldn't exist, I'm sure, but what would that look like? And what does it look like from an outside perspective, learning to be non-drifters? I have a kind of a theory that because of the whole information age going on right now and the internet, we're seeing a huge rise in mental health problems. But when I talk to people who have these, I think a huge part of it is them actually working through a lot of these bad things, seeing it in their families and their friends, and starting to separate themselves from these patterns. And that's hard. And a lot of it lends itself to isolation, ostracism, and other negative emotions. So I think the book paints it kind of clear, but I think it's interesting. I'd like to do some analysis to see if this kind of new age is bringing people towards a path of non-drifting, and if it's in the current part of the phase, is manifesting itself in a lot of negative feelings and traits.
Yeah, I would love to dive a little deeper. Maybe we can get a psychologist or someone on who's familiar with the book and more clinical side of psychology and sort of see the relationships between things like mental illness or mental health issues and some of these principles. That sounds very interesting. That's a great question, Alex. We'll talk later about how we can potentially elucidate that more. All right. Awesome. Okay, so I have one more thing that I want to go through today, and that's a little bit of a preview of the following 11 weeks. This is going to be a 12-part series in total. And the way that I'm going to do this, I'll share the principles that we're going to be going over, ideally one a week. And I'll talk about the process for how we're going to go through these principles. But as I go through each of these principles, keep a note if you can, if you got something to write on, keep track of which principles stand out to you as either ones that, just capture your attention in some way, whether you know why or not, or that you really don't understand. Like specifically, if you really don't understand what it's talking about, or you're not sure how to fully integrate that idea, just keep note of that. And then at the end, we'll have everybody put in the chat which ones stood out the most to them, and limit yourself to, let's say, 3. Right? Pick your top 3 that stand out to you the most. Once we're done, there are only 11. The way that we're going to do this series, I'm going to give an exercise every single week, some sort of outside work. And like I mentioned in the beginning, if you could just grant me 5 minutes of your time outside of the context of this podcast, which we're going to make considerably short enough to be absorbable. In that 5 minutes or 15 minutes, or if you want to dedicate 15 hours, like, be my guest, you'll just get more out of it. Go through the exercise and then come back the following week with some feedback, how did this impact you? What happened? And so in that sense, I think the main work is going to be done between podcasts, and I'll post the exercises beforehand as well. So you're absolutely invited to look at next week's exercise and get some pre-work done, and maybe do it again the following week if you are that kind of person. So let's start by going through the principles. And again, pick your top 3, and we will post those at the end. I think I'm going to share my screen for this. Let's do it this way. Share this. And I can't see I'm going to leave the chat down. So if anybody can't see this, we will, just listen carefully. And for anybody on the podcast side of things, again, listen very carefully. So principle number 1, I'm just going to read these. Do your own thinking on all occasions. The fact that human beings are given complete control over nothing save the power to think their own thoughts is laden with significance. Number 2, decide definitely what you want from life. Then create a plan for attaining it and be willing to sacrifice everything else if necessary, rather than accept permanent defeat. Don't worry, there will be a slide at the end with all of them if I'm going too fast for you. Just listen. Number 3, analyze temporary defeat, no matter of what nature or cause, and extract from it the seed of an equivalent advantage. Number 4, be willing to render useful service equivalent to the value of all material things you demand of life, and render the service first. Number 5, recognize that your brain is a receiving set that can be attuned to receive communications from the universal storehouse of infinite intelligence to help you transmute your desires into their physical equivalent. Number 6, recognize that your greatest asset is time, the only thing which you own outright, and the one thing which can be shaped into whatever material things you want. Budget your time so that none of it is wasted. Number 7, Recognize the truth that fear generally is a filler with which the devil occupies the unused portion of your mind. It is only a state of mind which you can control by filling the space it occupies with faith in your ability to make life provide you with whatever you demand of it. Number 8, insist. When you pray, do not beg. Demand what you want and insist upon getting exactly that with no substitutes. Number 9, recognize that life is a cruel taskmaster and that either you master it or it masters you. There is no halfway or compromising point. Never accept from life anything you do not want. If that which you do not want is temporarily forced upon you, you can refuse in your own mind to accept it, and it will make way for the thing you do want. Number 10, remember that your dominating thoughts attract, through a definite law of nature, by the shortest and most convenient route, their physical counterpart. Be careful what your thoughts dwell upon. And finally, be definite in everything you do and never leave unfinished thoughts in the mind. Form the habit of reaching definite decisions on all subjects. All right, so here's the list. And for everyone listening currently, go ahead, put in the chat your top 3. You can just put the numbers, and you can take a second to think about it.
Chase, could you repeat all those principles in this short form? Just
Absolutely.
read out the slide.
Number 1,
as people are, yeah.
do your own thinking on all occasions. Number 2, decide definitely what you want from life. Number 3, extract from defeat the seed of equivalent advantage. Number 4, render useful service first. Number 5, utilize your brain to actualize your desires. Number 6, recognize that your greatest asset is time. Number 7, replace fear with faith in your ability to make life provide you with whatever you demand of it. Number 8, insist upon getting exactly what you want with no substitutes. Number 9, recognize that life is a cruel taskmaster and that either you master it or it masters you. Number 10, remember that your dominating thoughts attract their physical counterpart. And finally, number 11, be definite in everything you do. Okay.
Okay, folks, keep voting. I'm keeping track. I'm keeping tally of all the votes.
Excellent. And again, you're voting on the top 3 that stand out to you, the ones that are most interesting or you have questions about, whichever 3 you would consider the 3 maybe the most important to you. If you're very familiar with the work and you've integrated some of these, just your top 3. Or top 1, that's good too. All right. So as those continue to roll in, it looks like most people have voted at this point. We will tally those up. I actually want to give you the exercise for the week. And this is going to require a little bit more work on your part right now. So if you're listening on your phone, pull up your notes app. If you're listening in your office, grab a notebook, grab a pen, grab something to type on. It's very small. And I want you to decide right now how much time this week you'd like to give me outside of the podcast. Oh, my phone just... How much time you'd like to give me. It could be 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 0 minutes. Please don't put 0. 15 minutes, 2 hours. I promise it'll be worth it. Just pick a number. Let's say you put 5 minutes. Now, the next thing I want you to do is think about your week. For the next 7 days, what are your approximate plans for each day? And schedule tentatively. You can pencil it in if you want. Schedule when you're going to take those 5 minutes or those 15 minutes very specifically. It could be Thursday at 10 a.m. If you're really packed and you need to pull up your calendar right now, I'm sorry. I feel sorry for you. If you don't know when you can do this, that's totally fine. But please schedule that 5 or 10 minutes. If you're listening to the podcast version of this in the car, like, pull over, be safe. Don't do this while you're driving. And now here's what you're going to do. This task, this exercise is scalable. If you put 5 minutes, there's a 5-minute version. If you put 10 hours, there's a 10-hour version. What I want you to do is what I would consider the inspectional or pre-reading of Outwitting the Devil. And you don't even have to own the book to do this. So if you do own the book and you decided to give me 20 minutes of your time, go through the chapter headers, the summaries, find some articles, anything you can to get a whole picture of the book. Maybe if you only are giving me 2 minutes of your time or 1 minute, you just pull up the Wikipedia article and read what you can, right? If you gave me 10 hours, go read the book again. Whatever scale you decided to dedicate this week to this exercise, figure out how to use that time to get a picture of the book as a whole. If you gave me less time, it's going to be a less dense whole. If you gave me more time, it's going to be more dense, but get the whole. Right? Don't just read the first chapter and put it down. Get the whole in that amount of time. And you can decide once you're done with that if you want to do more time getting a more fine-grained whole and, fill in the skeleton. But this is the inspectional reading step in the how to read a book method of reading. Get the whole. Find that picture. And come up with maybe a question or some question about, it could be multiple questions about how to apply these ideas, maybe what the ideas are about. Come up with some questions that you can sort of carry with you as you listen to next week or the next couple of weeks, or if you never listen again, that you can carry with you as you go read the book. Find some questions to ask. So that's the exercise for the week. And again, this is going to be the only week where the actual book is involved in this much detail. Beyond this, we're going to go into the principles. We're going to bring in other works. We're going to do our syntopical method of bringing in the Stoics and blanking off the top of my mind who else I wanted to bring in. But we're going to be bringing in other works. And this is just going to set you up for success in that domain. So that is that. All right. Shrikant is ready with the results.
Yes. Shall I announce the results?
Sure.
I will announce it in tiers. So
Okay.
First tier of the top 3 principles, and then the next tier of the next 3, and then the rest. So the top 3 principles, Chase, are 3, 7, and 10. So could you read them out? 3, 7, and 10.
So number 3 is extract from defeat the seed of equivalent advantage. 7 is replace fear with faith in your ability to make life provide you with whatever you demand of it. And then number 10, remember that your dominating thoughts attract their physical counterpart.
Excellent. Shall I give you the second tier?
Sure.
The next tier is 5, 6, and 9.
Number 5 is utilize your brain to actualize your desires. Number 6 is recognize that your greatest asset is time. And number 9 is recognize that life is a cruel taskmaster and that either you master it or it masters you.
Wonderful. And all the rest are in the third tier.
Okay, excellent. I think that's where I want to wrap things up today. I think that's good. I think we've got enough. This was beautiful. Thank you guys for listening. And Shrikant, if you want to open things up to discussion,
Yes.
we can head in
I will do
that
that so
direction.
you can
Thank you,
stop
guys.
sharing this.